Hi, my name is Megan Robbins. I am currently in my second course of the EPOL program in Leadership and Learning Design. I am going to be discussing today my update number 4, which is called Teaching to Reduce Trauma. One of the reasons that I'm sharing this update is because both of the works that were assigned to me a few weeks ago were about social and emotional learning and the ACEs quiz. And this is an area that I don't know a lot about. So I decided to do an update, especially after the unit on bullying and looking at situations in school that might get in the way of learning or building communities of knowledge. So Carrie Gaffney, who is was published, it used to be called Teaching for Tolerance, and now it's called Learning for Justice. But it was published on their platform, and she wrote this in 2009 that we're often looked at external factors as we do like our ACEs quizzes, adverse childhood experiences or traumatic experiences. We also often look to the home environment or other external factors. And she explains that ACEs tools can be very, very helpful. The quiz can be very, very helpful. But she also criticizes that it's making the assumption as a community of learning or a knowledge community in the context of a K 12 school that we as educators or as a system aren't contributing to those traumatic experiences. And she said that that is a problem. And so trauma informed practice revolves around the assumption that trauma only really occurs outside of the school walls. And she's arguing that we need to make sure that our trauma informed practice actually helps us teach in a way that mitigates any trauma that we could be causing learners, that push them outside of the thinking and learning community as full participants. And so she gives an example here about students who experience systematic oppression. For example, they're often highly vulnerable and they are experiencing traumatic things through their curriculum that can be really triggering. For example, teaching about racism or social injustice because of race as if it's a thing of the past. Reflecting on my own experience, I know growing up, that is how I learned about it. You know, we had this problem of racism, began with slavery, and then Martin Luther Jr. came, and then the civil rights, and then boom, were resolved. And obviously, that is not the case. And she said, so when we teach about things like racism, that like they're in the past, students who are experiencing racism in their lived reality, that causes a lot of unhelpful cognitive dissonance for them. It's a trigger and it can be a traumatic experience. So really what we want to do is to build pedagogies that are culturally aware, sensitive, and true to reality. And it we don't want to gaslight our students. We don't want to traumatize them because this just pushes them outside of the community of knowledge. And of course, we want to do the opposite. Wenger in 98, he argued that a community where learning, knowledge, and meaning is the goal, that social interaction is of the utmost importance, right? So he's saying that this is a quote, encompassing process of being active participants in the practices of social communities and constructing identities in relation to those communities. So essentially, if we're not creating communities where students can associate their identity with that community, that it can be, a contributor and an identity building experience, then we're pushing people out of that participation. And I think this is something that a lack of culturally sensitive pedagogy can create a huge problem for, because when we fail to be culturally sensitive or true to reality and aware of inequity and social injustice. And in fact, we do teach issues of systematic racism like they're things of the past, then we're not allowing our students to be a part of a place where they can feel like their identity is connected, right? They have a huge gap in their lived experience at home and then what they're experiencing and what they're being told is reality from honestly a place of power that has power over them. And so we're really creating a situation for those students where they cannot identify with that community and will not, and will ultimately probably shut down and fail to learn, or make any steps forward in their dimensions of development. So, Gaffney goes on to explain that issues of policy can also create these divides too. And so, on a systematic scale, it might not just be something that's mentioned or taught in the classroom, but our systematic approach, this has to be a concern from the top down in our K 12 learning spaces. And so she's really asking the question, how can we make this shift to healing spaces when we do have students who are coming in with trauma, when we do have students who have adverse childhood experience, and not trigger those traumas or not cause trauma through our pedagogy, so that ultimately, if we create this environment where they can identify and they can actually use those experiences to enhance the community, right? And to bring knowledge to the community and really participate, then we're going to be making the shift towards that community of knowledge. So overall, I felt like this research was really helpful for me as an educator who works primarily with secondary students, but honestly, I work with middle school as well, and very relevant to what we're experiencing in the K-12 world right now. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.